PRS Foundation is the UK's leading charitable funder of new music and talent development. Our funding for music creators and the organisations supporting them plays a vital role in the resilience of the UK's talent pipeline.
Coming out here is very costly, but it's something that needs to be done, and it's something that's going to help the culture, so we appreciate it.
A lot of the time, songwriters are behind the scenes and we don't get celebrated. So to be celebrated and to be exposed to the kind of support that PRS Foundation give, I think it's amazing.
So many of the artists in the UK really rely on this in order to continue for the UK to be one of these superpowers of the arts.
Hello everyone and welcome to this year's PRS Foundation Talent Development Conference. I'm Joe Franklin, Chief Exec at PRS Foundation, and this week we'll be bringing you a digital conference from Tuesday the 26th of January until Friday the 29th. It will include panel conversations and networking opportunities and is presented with contributions from our network of talent development partners. This year's conference is in partnership with Youth Music, British Council and PPL, and our theme is talent development and recovery. So we're looking at the role of talent development partners in building a fairer music ecosystem. So what is the Talent Development Partner Network? We launched this strategic network in 2016, and it involves organisations from across the whole of the UK, covers all genres, all career levels, and we support music creators from all backgrounds. Our TDPs work at the front line of talent development, offering year-round support that we know has a huge impact on songwriters, composers, artists, bands, and producers across the country. We currently have 49 talent development partners, and we'll be bringing colleagues and music creators from those organizations throughout the week. You'll notice them in panel speaker lists, you'll meet them in networking roundtable sessions, and we're including case studies in between sessions and within the link below. Of course, it's been a very tough year for most of our organizations, and particularly for those working in the live sector. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on the music creators we all serve and others across the ecosystem. But we've been very impressed with the resilience and adaptability of our TDPs. We've kept in close touch. We know that wherever possible, they've stepped up to meet changing creative and career needs. This is reflected in the sessions all week. And as per our real life annual talent development conference, it's a chance to bring together music creators, organizations, companies, and individuals. We all miss gigs. We all miss proper connection with friends and colleagues. I miss going to conferences around the UK and catching up with those in our ever-growing network. But I genuinely think that the huge challenges we all face in 2021 can only be overcome when we come together. The beauty of our annual conference is that it provides a safe space to share, to learn, and to connect with others. So please take advantage of this as much as possible this week. I'm going to run through some of the panels and themes so you know what to expect. Today's panel session, which starts at 11:10, is called Reassess, Reimagine, and Recover. I wanted to bring together 3 outstanding and outspoken music creators who also chair organizations. They are PRS Foundation's new chair, Nitin Sawhney, YolanDa Brown, who chairs youth music, and Crispin Hunt, the chair of the Ivors Academy. They'll be in conversation with broadcaster Nikki Bedi, and they will not shy away from all the big topics affecting creators right now. They'll be offering thoughts on how we can build a fairer sector that puts music creators at the center of everyone's plans. This will be followed by today's breakout session, which starts at 12:25. We look at how localized TDPs can continue to adapt and to help talent to develop nationally and internationally. And those breakout rooms will touch upon the themes covered by our panel. On Wednesday, our main panel is called Using Data for Equitable Recovery. It looks at how those working in talent development should use data to identify gaps while building authentic relationships and understanding the barriers that face underrepresented groups. We have speakers from our talent development organizations, plus music creators they've worked with, discussing this topic further. Then you can delve more deeply into it through Wednesday's roundtable breakout rooms. Since we first ran our conference in real life, we've been talking to liaisons at British Council about how we can bring together talent development learnings from around the world to share best practice. I'm very pleased that the virtual version of the TDC means that we can partner with British Council and we can do that very thing. Leah will be joined on Thursday's panel by experts from Morocco, Uganda, China, and Myanmar. That session will cover the challenges, opportunities facing people in those countries, and we'll discuss recovery and resilience in Africa and Asia. For our talent development partners and for British Council delegates involved, there will be a post-panel session on Thursday, where you can find out more. Then finally on Friday, our main panel is called Somewhere Over the Rainbow. This panel looks at the positive stories coming out of our TDP network. We explore how organizations have been changing their strategy, pivoting plans, and innovating. And we want this panel to inspire fresh approaches, more collaboration, and more music creator engagement so that we can start to rebuild in 2021. Finally, from 12:25 on the Friday, we're hosting a networking session between all conference attendees. To attend any of the roundtable sessions, make sure you've signed up in advance using the event link, and you can find the Zoom link for roundtable sessions on this page. You can always use the chat here if you have any questions for our team. You'll notice there are short breaks in between each panel time and roundtable sessions. We'll fill the breaks with TDP case studies, and our amazing team look forward to seeing you all virtually throughout the week. Recently, I attempted to summarize 2020 in my New Year message, which you can find at prsfoundation.com. That was no easy task given the devastating impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on music. Few have felt the impacts as much as the songwriters, composers, artists, bands, and producers who are the beating heart of the music sector. PRS Foundation adapted, and we maintained project funding for creators last year in the context of record levels of demand and record levels of funding need. The event of 2020 also shone a light on the inequalities and barriers facing talented creators in the UK. Many of those barriers have been known to us funders and to non-profit organisations for years. Our TDP network plays a huge role in forging stronger, fairer music societies. I feel this is where our wider community of creators, organisations, partners, and individuals can and will make a real difference. This collaborative and inclusive approach feels more relevant today than ever, and will continue to respond to COVID-19 barriers by maintaining programs which support talent in meaningful and transformative ways. We're going to reintroduce some of the schemes which could not happen last year because of the pandemic, and we'll continue to adapt programs so that we do what we've always done over our 21-year history, which is meeting the changing development needs of songwriters and composers. When it comes to addressing stark inequalities, we spent the second half of last year building a new and ambitious program. Power Up tackles anti-Black racism and supports Black music creators and Black industry professionals in the UK. Power Up was announced yesterday and has been shaped by deep conversations within the team and with our board, through focus group sessions and through our executive steering committee. We forged strong partnerships across the music industry, but we feel much more needs to be done. So we encourage everyone watching these sessions to get in touch and to get involved. Our senior Power Up manager, Yao Owusu, chairs Wednesday's panel. Please reach out to Yao or to myself if you have any questions about Power Up. I see it as a great example of going further in 2021 to create a strong, diverse, and more connected music industry. We know that our TDPs will play a vital role in what is shaping up to be another very tough year for creators. Their timely and impactful support and the duty of care that they've shown throughout this period means I think we're in a good place looking ahead to the new programme year. But it's very hard to adapt with such uncertainty. And when we know more needs to be done to tackle inequities, we know our organisations are needed more than they were before. With limited resource and multiple challenges being faced, we think strategic collaboration is the way forward. And we're committed to spearheading new ways to bring together organisations and creators we work with. This year, we're piloting top-up bursaries via some of our organisations so that we can reach those showing the most potential quicker. At our last conference, I was pleased to announce a separate top-up bursary, thanks to funding support from Youth Music. That's delivered very well this year. I'm very pleased that Youth Music are coming back on board as a TDP partner this year. Through our commitment from our main donor, PRS for Music, we're pleased to be able to serve the changing needs of our TDPs for the foreseeable future. And I'm extremely pleased to announce today that our close relationship with PPL through industry funds is expanding. They'll now be joining us as TDP funding partners. This helps us all to support talent, to create outstanding new music, and to build sustainable careers. So thanks to the PPL team and to all our other partners. That's quite enough from me, but I hope it helps to set the tone and to kick off an important week of discussions and connection. I want to thank all my colleagues, especially those bringing the sessions together and handling the tech behind the scenes. And I want to thank all our guest speakers and those attending our networking sessions. Enjoy the first session at 11:10 a.m. and I hope to connect with many of you over the next few days. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, and welcome to all of you who've joined us today for this session, which is called Reassess, Reimagine and Recover. I'm Nikki Bedi, and you all know this better than anybody, that there's long been an awareness of creative and career barriers facing songwriters, composers, artists and producers. But the precariousness of music creation as a career has never been more apparent since the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement and Brexit. Inequalities have been painfully exposed. So to reassess, reimagine and recover, we have three inspiring chairs with us today. Nitin Sawhney for the PRS Foundation, YolanDa Brown from Youth Music, and Crispin Hunt of the Ivors Academy. So they're all music creators themselves. They're all perfectly placed to reflect and challenge what's happening today. My first question to all of you is, what will you be retraining as if we don't sort this out ASAP? YolanDa, you're laughing hardest. I'll come to you first.
Well, I was actually on tour in Australia when the first lockdown was announced, and we were still going through all the concerts, and I knew that things were really dire when the Grand Prix in Melbourne, which was across the road from my hotel, got cancelled. Since then, you know, they're still racing. So racing driver, I'm retraining.
And you do like a fast car, I know.
You like the fast cars, yeah.
Nitin, what about you?
Assassin, probably, or except boxes come up quite a few times. I mean, all kinds of weird things have come up because there's all these suggestions if you do the online kind of form or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, on a more serious note, how ridiculous, how totally ridiculous and condescending was that? But, you know, like the idea that they felt that musicians should, you know, retrain as opposed to supporting them in the way that they should be.
Yeah.
I found it an unbelievable thing. But yeah, I mean, which is hence my first choice.
Assassins. Assassin racing driver Crispin.
Right. Well, I've been thinking about this quite heavily, and it strikes me that if you look kind of a little bit into the future, and everything, the only thing that should have value is creativity, because robots will be doing all of the jobs. 3D printers will be printing absolutely all of the products, so no product will have any value. So I might go and retrain as someone who works in a kind of 3D printing print fluid factory, because that's where the smart money is in the future, really. I think that's where, you know, that's the only place that's going to be making any kind of a living is in 3D printing. So
perspicacious of you, and that gives you all a great idea of these three personalities here. So would you all briefly describe what your role entails at each organization? YolanDa.
Yes, so I'm chair of Youth Music, and we believe in the power of music and that every young person should have access to music education in whichever form works the best for them. And we fund amazing organizations that provide those music making activities. And it's been amazing. 2020 has been a year of growth for us. You know, we've had full attendance at all board meetings. We've had away days all on Zoom, and it's been really productive. The team have been fantastic and kept on going, creating new funds as well, with a focus on 18 to 25-year-olds, music makers, and of course, an emergency fund for organizations during COVID. We've got the incubator fund as well. And we're actually, for the first time, going to be directly funding young music makers in 2021. So we're really, really excited about the growth and also about all the changes in the world, the conversations that we're having, and sort of being at the forefront of those, including inclusion, Black Lives Matter, and diversity.
Which we'll talk about a little later as well. Crispin, what about you?
Well, I'm a chair. It's my great honour to be chair of something called the Ivors Academy, which used to be called BASCA, which was the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, but it had a recent update because it needed to be fit for the 21st century, and now it is. It's an amazing organisation of thousands of music creators. We've got some of the kind of gods in our number. We've got Kate Bush and Paul McCartney and Florence and the Machine and extraordinary people, down to about 1,000 emerging songwriters. And we we're a collective trade body. We join together and we argue for the rights and the kind of empowerment and the not education, but the enlightenment of the music creators. So,
Nitin, what about you?
Well, I'm very proud to be the chairman. I was made chair last year of the PRS Foundation, and the PRS Foundation is the leading charity for funding new music and talent development, and it's got an amazing track record. I mean, that's why I was particularly proud to be asked, because particularly with inclusion and diversity, they've funded some of my heroes as well, and people that I listen to regularly, And, I mean, for example, in 2019, I think it was 50%, that's 56% of, of the people who were funded were from underrepresented genders, then 18% from Black minorities, and then from 11% were for people who self-identified as disabled. And I think they've always done this. They've always been very good at that. And I think particularly last year was the Sustaining Creativity Fund in response to Black Lives Matter, and then now with Power Up, which is amazing. Really kind of addressing the disparities and the issues with the music industry as a whole in relation to Black creators. And I think I'm very proud to be chair of an organisation that is really looking at that very seriously.
And we'll talk a bit more about Power Up later. What do you think the difference is with all of you? And what do you bring in terms of your approach to your organisations, because you are music creators yourself? Crispin, I'll come to you.
Well, I think it's been conspicuously absent from the entire development of music is the voice of music creators. Music creators kind of traditionally have been patted on the head and told to go and smoke pot and play their guitar and write songs, and then somebody else takes care of the cut. But those days, thankfully, are very, very much over. If modern music creators are fully canny, each music creator runs a small business, and we are totally well equipped to engage fully and be, as somebody once cleverly said, at the table rather than on the menu. And I think it's and I think we're reaching a point, and Nitin and YolanDa are perfect, and myself are hopefully perfect examples of where there isn't a kind of infantilization of the music creator any longer. And there's still an awful lot of that kind of culture going on in the business, and I wish it would stop, really, because if you don't like working with music creators, you're in the wrong business. If you feel you have to kind of infantilize music creators, then don't work with them. The music business should be full of people who want to work with music creative people and understand that their voice is completely valid, and that they should see a share of equity and a fair share of every single penny that their creativity creates.
YolanDa, you're nodding in agreement.
I know, my head's about to fall off, I think. I agree wholeheartedly, and it was so refreshing even to sort of receive an offer to come to interview to be chair of youth music, and actually just put my viewpoint across the table, as you say, Crispin. And it was so refreshing just to hear them say, yes, we agree with what you're saying. We understand that you have an insight into what it's like to create music and make music, and so you should be at the table, sort of bringing the experience of sort of what the climate is like. And I think it's really important, even during my time when we've looked for new trustees, it's been equally as important to make sure that there's a finger on the pulse when you're around the board table, because it changes so rapidly, the climate, what's needed, the needs of musicians, and working in music education, which is our focus. It's really important to understand what exactly is happening out there. And so I'm just absolutely glad. And as soon as they said yes, I was very pleased. And you see a change in the wind happening.
Nitin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as music creators, we bring empathy, passion, and experience. I mean, passion comes from having to, all of us have struggled at an early point on career to get to a point where we were able to do what we wanted to do with our creativity. And I guess, it's recognizing and acknowledging that is the case. And I think it's more so the case than ever for young musicians and for musicians who are really entering into the music industry, but not just musicians. I mean, it's also promoters, agents, other people, who are professionals engaged with the music industry. It's really important to recognize their contribution. And as creators ourselves, I think we all have really benefited from teamwork and lots of other people who also help and enable us to do what we do. And so, to be on the other side of things and to be able to kind of have a voice in that situation is a privilege, but it's also important. As Crispin was saying, there is a history of condescension as well towards people who, there's I guess that kind of the thing is that people have this idea that you can only be one thing at a time, and labeling and so on, emphasizes that way of thinking, or kind of way of thinking. So it's important to kind of to address that, I guess.
Do you want that end of that last sentence again, because there was a phone call?
I know. I don't know. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. That's cool.
Human.
It's life, isn't it? So if we look at 2020 and the pandemic, the political changes, some would say upheaval, lots must have changed in all three of your lives and in the lives of the people creating around you. What would you say has been the biggest change for you, YolanDa? And I suppose what I'm looking for is an example of the hardships.
Yeah, well, from a personal standpoint, as I say, I was in the middle of touring, starting the year as I meant to go on, and it was set to be such an amazing year, very tiring year, mind, but a really, really great year for me in music. And that's what I've been working towards. I'm an independent artist with my adult music, and so this was the moment where it's all culminating in some lovely collaborations, touring in territories that I'd never been before, and that literally all in a night just stopped. Getting those calls from booking agents to say, this is postponed, this is cancelled, maybe 2022, all the rest of it. And so initially you kind of get that shock factor of what's happening here, what's happening with the world. And as we've gone through, a year of COVID and not being able to do what we've planned and not being able to plan, can I add as well, it really is shaky. I speak to my band and session musicians that I know where music and making music is their main bread and butter. And it's getting really, really tight now. And even in terms of planning for the future, how do we know what that looks like, especially as independent artists with the smaller venues, sort of 500 capacity, 1,000 capacity, 50 capacity? What happens to those venues? A lot of them aren't being able to sort of stay, and so we can't book. I'm very, very glad with the silver lining to have sort of a career in broadcast. And so I've been able to continue and sustain and continue to create music, but with the support of my broadcast career. And, as Nitin has said, you do need to be doing multiple things now just to make sure that everything can stay afloat. And it is a very, very nerve-wracking experience, I have to say.
So I mean, but this is the whole thing, isn't it? The inequalities and the lack of fairness in so many ways. Lots of people are not going to be able to have that side hustle, that other thing going on. This year must have highlighted a lot of that, Nitin.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been interesting because obviously, as YolanDa was saying, it's been very difficult for musicians to plan, and I think it's impacted some people much more than others. And you're right to point out the unfairness and the disparities. I mean, after the Black Lives Matter happened, I think there was the PRS Foundation, their response immediately, particularly to Blackout Tuesday, was to start the Sustaining Creativity Fund, which actually supported 51 Black creators of music. And it's recognizing that those disparities existed, that some people were more affected than others. And that was a specific hardship fund. On top of that, there was the Emergency Relief Fund, which I was privileged not only to be involved with the PRS Foundation as chairman, but also to put together a performance in isolation with other band members. So we actually performed separately in our own isolated spaces, but we performed to raise money for the Emergency Relief Fund to specifically help musicians through hardship. So it's tricky because the PRS Foundation isn't there specifically for hardship, but we were able to address it through various means and through setting up funds specifically for that purpose.
Crispin, do you want to talk about your year and also some of the massive inequalities that it's thrown up?
Well, COVID has been absolutely catastrophic and devastating for the music industry. We've had no kind of support. We've been unable to play live, which is where 80% of most musicians' money comes from playing live. And that has shone an incredibly explicit and stark light on all of the inequalities within the music industry. We've, the Ivors Academy has, and thankfully, has been working with the Musicians Union on a campaign to fix streaming, because we believe that streaming is still controlled by a completely disproportionate early 20th century business model, and it needs to reform that actually streaming is not the way that streaming remunerates creators is not at all reflective of the kind of usage. And it's been an absolutely fascinating and devastating year. In a way, it's been useful. Zoom has been, and the kind of fluency of Zoom has been incredibly effective. It's allowing people to organize, and people have had the time and the incentive to organize, because suddenly it's been laid bare, rather than creators spending their time thinking about writing a song or getting into the studio or traveling to and from a gig and making a great performance, which is our job. That's our primary work. But we've suddenly been removed from all that, and kind of tactlessly at the same time, some of the larger sectors of the music industry have been announcing enormous profits, doing enormous share value sales, and it was totally evident that something is not right. It became totally evident that something is severely out of whack. There is an enormous amount of money in recordings now. The only reason why people had to rely on live is because piracy destroyed all the value of recordings. There is an enormous amount of money in recordings now. The major labels are making, more than $20 million a day out of streaming. And fundamentally, it's wrong. They are no longer doing a manufacturing and distribution role, but they're still taking a manufacturing and distribution cut. And when really they are doing a glorified marketing job, and you wouldn't pay a digital marketing company 80% of your income and give them 100% of your business, which is exactly what happens now. So fundamentally, I think it's sorry, I'm on a bit of a soapbox, but this matters a lot to me.
No, it's a very important soapbox.
We're at a kind of watershed, which is literally, for the whole music industry, which is long overdue. And a watershed is literally where multiple streams turn into a river, and that's the point where we're at. And I think it's a kind of an epiphany and a reckoning for the music industry, which is long overdue.
And how have you moved towards #fix streaming?
Well, it started naturally, really. I mean, a friend of mine, Tom Gray, we've been having these conversations for a very long time, and a friend of mine, Tom Gray, who I've known for years because we were both in Sheffield bands together, and Tom and I, and we'd all been having these conversations for a very long time, and Tom and I had a long conversation, and Tom decided to is a very, very articulate and very clever man, and he decided to put out to test the temperature right at the beginning of lockdown, and put out a thread, a beautifully written thread of streaming, raising some of the important questions that creators need to ask about the industry that they're in, just to kind of see if there was any appetite for it. And it had over well over 1 million impressions in 24 hours. The temperature was boiling, and there is a huge appetite for this conversation to be taking place at the moment. And it will lead to a much better industry and a much more flourishing future for British business, because every single creator is a small British business person, basically.
So along with the big streaming platforms who are being implicated here, what about some of the new streaming startups, Resonate, Audius, Sunstream? Do any of those, are they ever going to get anywhere, or are they just too small and too idealistic?
Well, I hope so. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the internet, everyone thinks that huge companies get locked in, and they probably do. But AOL was got removed, and everyone thought that they were doing it, and now Google has taken over. It can easily happen again. You had MySpace, and then YouTube took over. There is a possibility for change, and I think there's definitely a demand from the public, and the consumer and the fans are getting involved in this now. The fans didn't realize that if they listen to nothing but Nitin Sawhney, their money goes to Dua Lipa, which is fundamentally wrong. It's not. It just Dua Lipa's bloody amazing. I don't begrudge her, but there is just
really
the market just isn't working.
She couldn't make Homelands, let's face it. How has it affected you, Yolanda? Do you even know what your figures are for some of your streams?
It is. It's interesting coming from an independent standpoint and sort of setting up your own record label imprint, but going through different sort of label service providers. It almost feels like Chinese whispers. By the time you get your report, you can't even see where the money's come from, where are the streams happening. And even in terms of being an independent artist, you want to be able to target that market again with your next release. And it's not helpful in the slightest, and the finance doesn't make sense, I have to say, when you see it, and you just think, well, what was the point, and where is it all going? So yeah, especially when it's not coming through sort of a label direct or anything like that, for the independent artist, it does need to become a lot clearer and a lot more lucrative, because as I say, when I realized that, royalties is not necessarily the way, or streams is not necessarily the way, live is where the main part of my cash flow comes from. And, selling the records on the road, meeting the audiences, and actually sort of being right there on the grassroots. And if we don't have that now due to COVID, we don't know when we're going to be able to get into Europe and how much it will cost because of Brexit, then really, streaming is where we need to be able to make right and be able to keep our careers afloat.
And Nitin, what's your experience once you swallow?
No, I feel that streaming's been a massive. I mean, it's been a huge area of discussion that everyone's been engaging with, and I think Crispin and Tom Gray and people, on social media, there's so many people involved in this. I mean, the other day, the DCMS committee, talking to the heads of major labels, that was very, very interesting, quite revealing. And I think it was great that Sky actually also rebroadcast that. But it's, there is more and more attention, as Crispin was saying, on this as a serious issue. It's a weird one, because I kind of think that the problem is really the filtering, through record labels and publishers to the artists, and then it just becomes about. It's determined in a way that is nothing to do, as Crispin was saying, with people, the way people are listening to music. And I just find that just so bizarre that this is a system that has been allowed to continue for as long as it has. So I personally feel very strongly about it. I feel that it needs to absolutely change. The broken record movement it's fantastic that hashtag has had such great response. And I think it's also, you know, there are artists like Guy Garvey and Nadine Shah and obviously Crispin and Tom Gray, and people who've actually been very vocal in really changing the mood of what's going on.
Sorry,
which I think is great.
If I can, you know, artists enter into a contractual relationship with a label. In a sense, you give your copyright, you assign your copyright to them. There should be a duty of care, like there is in most other kind of businesses, to ensure that label tries to maximize the value of your copyright, because that's the relationship. And the point is that, and the advantages of the internet is that, you know, in that relationship, that, you know, those huge conglomerates, aggregators of rights, should be able to withstand really robust scrutiny. And the truth is that they can't withstand robust scrutiny, because their entire business model is based upon opacity, and they seem to be remarkably reluctant to be transparent, and that, you know, why, the question is.
Could I just add also to that, you know, we're speaking about the current climate of how streaming works, but actually it's something that, especially from the viewpoint of youth music as well, that we need to get right for our future generations, because as music makers are coming through the ranks, the idea of sort of being able to tour live, or the traditional getting signed and having lots of budget behind your record, is really sort of coming down and really changing. And that route of making your own way and streaming is really important to our next generation.
Yeah, can I back that up, support that, because I think you know, this and that's such an important point that you just made, Yolanda, because, you know, I think young people right now, I mean, when I was younger, there was so much support from record companies. I mean, there were development deals, and there were all kinds of ways in which you know, tour support. But then gradually, it's been eroded bit by bit for young musicians. And I see so many young musicians who are really suffering because they feel like their hope has been taken away from them to really flourish as artists. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of what you're saying.
And I think it definitely is sort of the role of the funders like us, like the Arts Council, to look at those younger musicians and see what's needed. And, you know, it's great to work with the PRS Foundation for the talent development, as a talent development partner network for 2021, because I think all of those elements, listening to our young people, especially the 18 to 25s, and just knowing what is needed to help support that and bolster it up, because otherwise the skilling that we were talking about at the beginning will become a real deal for our next generation.
Can I just cut in there on that? Absolutely, but there's something odd about a music industry that relies on two extraordinarily brilliant charities to kind of fight, you know, to bring up the calves of the industry. If they're only fattening the already fattened cows, then they are doing something very wrong, and it's very myopic, and it's an entire culture of kind of, you know, but the bonus culture within the music industry. You know, Warner Music's top 5 executives, you know, I've studied their Warner IPO, and they paid themselves last year the equivalent $120 million, which was the entire earnings of the top 30 tracks on Warner's catalog for 5 people. So, you know, it's just sorry, it's wrong. It can't continue. And those kind of bonus schemes are, you know, it leads to short-sightedness, and they really are. You know, the industry for some reason is not looking after its young, and it's falling on charity to look after its young, and charity sort of teaches them lessons. If you look at the PRS Foundation, you know, the Mercury Music Prize, which is run by the BPI, but I think in the last few years, 6 out of 11 of their nominees have had funding from the PRS Foundation, and they probably wouldn't have got commercial funding anywhere else. They have proved themselves. It's only because PRS Foundation will take the risk in funding and investing in stuff which is just musically brilliant, rather than looks like kind of candy pop that will sell well on the shelves. I'm being very outspoken here, sorry, but it's
that's what this is
livid
for.
about it. Yeah.
huge amount of the pre-Brexit negotiatings focused on fisheries. I think that we all know that the fisheries is worth £1.4 billion and the music industry is 5.8 billion. Would you like to talk about that? Who wants to go first?
I'm desperate to talk about it. Sorry, I'm not taking my turn, but yeah, but of course, you know, we are in a kind of political reality, and not many musicians vote Tory. So it's a you know, but I think it is there's a real opportunity that's being missed here. I think music, Britain has always kind of deluded itself that it's a nation of battleships and bankers and barristers, when in fact, if you look at the, you know, opening ceremony to the London Olympic Games, what we really mean to the rest of the world is the Beatles, James Bond and Mr. Bean. You know, really, it's our culture that is the thing that drives British value, and it's hugely important. And I think, you know, music is a major national asset. And we travel around the world. We are ambassadors of Britishness, and I fought very hard. I even ran in the European elections opposing Brexit because I think it was a remarkably regressive and isolationist step. But you know, we are where we are, and there is an opportunity for the government to make Britain, if we can persuade them that this is necessary, to turn Britain into probably the best place in the world to be a music creator and to have your music rights. And we've got to kind of persuade government that this should actually be a top priority for them, rather than you know, way down on the list. But unfortunately, you know, looking at the situation with touring, I mean, this goes back to our last conversation. If we're not going to be able to tour in Europe, for, you know, I was speaking to the Danish radio the other day, who said that they'd been speaking to Roskilde Festival, and Roskilde Festival said, this is devastating because we will pay for the costs of buying visas for Radiohead to come over and headline for the 10th time. We will not pay for the emerging artists to come over. We just can't afford it. The economics just don't work. And that is so short-sighted. So it needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed. You know, there are.
I think, although I would say, Crispin, that I think what's happening now is that there is movement on work permits and so on. But I think it's more like carnets, for example. You know, the idea that artists, as you said, you know, who are up and coming, you know, it's very prohibitive cost-wise for them to actually tour. So, you know, bands that are getting paid much less money than you know, even middle kind of size bands are not going to be able to tour around Europe and experience that. And I think that's where it's worrying, because it's about breakthrough bands not really having that opportunity to tour, and you know, becoming increasingly isolationist. And I think this is the whole problem with it's the mentality, as you were saying as well, with, you know, with Brexit, this idea of Priti Patel proudly declaring the end of freedom of movement, which is just such a xenophobic load of nonsense. And for me, you know, when I was you know, we talked about the Olympics. I mean, when I was part of the Cultural Olympiad, I was very proud of the way the Olympics was presented. You know, the NHS and multiculturalism right at the forefront of that. And I really think that is my view of what Britain should be, or the UK should be, which is inclusive and diverse. And that is really what I want to be an ambassador for. And I don't really want this government, which I don't consider to be, I mean, you know, watching Jacob Rees-Mogg with his condescending load of nonsense yesterday, which would incense anybody who's involved in the music industry. You know, it's so frustrating because there's just excuses and blame and lies, blatant lies, which we have to call out, because I'm sorry, whatever, you know, people's political persuasions are, you know, facts are facts, and if they're not called out, you know, people can get away with stuff that is just blatantly unfair, and I think that's going on.
I have a question for all of you then. So we're recording this incidentally on the 22nd, so Jacob Rees-Mogg was talking on the 21st.
Sorry.
Will our government go back and renegotiate with the EU over music rights, carnets, the travel, the work permits? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
You know, I was just going to add to that as well. That,
Yeah.
you know, the fact that you said in terms of the amount of money that music brings in, I think that really music needs to be seen as an export. Our culture needs to be seen as an export and a product, the same way that, you know, fish are, or whatever else we're talking about. And so,
more so, actually.
Yeah, more so, if anything. And I think about myself as a musician and touring, and Europe is where I tour the most.
Right.
To think that I'd have to pay for each of my saxophones to cross a border, and I travel with 3 minimum every single concert. We have all of our other musicians carrying their guitars. It doesn't make any sense. And I think what's happening now, you know, similar to the streaming sort of movement that we're seeing, and, you know, the campaign against that, is to actually highlight these stories. Because what I've realized is that, especially in government, but even to the layman, nobody actually really knows what it entails to tour, what it means to have to book flights and hotels, and who pays for that, what it means to be able to rehearse, to transfer all of your merchandise into another country and pay the fees on that, the fees that you have to pay to everybody else that's part of that story. I don't actually think that government, number one, or anybody knows the story. And I think that's what our next move needs to be, highlighting what does it mean when you've made the decision, what does it mean, and what does it look like for our independent musicians, as well as our label and signed musicians as well.
Although that assumes that this particular government would actually care, but I think they do.
We need to shout it louder and louder.
Be the squeaky hinge that gets the oil. Right?
Yeah, I think there is an opportunity to go back in and renegotiate with the EU. A certain amount of this deal was deliberately done as a negotiating tactic at the kind of 11th hour, and there was a certain amount of it that was still open to negotiation. They won't reopen the deal, that's for sure, but it's perfectly possible to. We need, rather than to negotiating with individual nations, 27 individual nations across the EU. EU is our biggest music exporter. They export 47% of our music is exported to the EU, and we have a significant advantage across the EU. We are one of only 3 countries in the world which export music, the US, ourselves, and Sweden, and we risked losing that advantage, and we risk, the value that it may make 5.2 billion at the moment, which in comparison to the banking sector may seem like small fry to the UK government. But the point is, actually, if we rectified and made Britain really a really great place to have music with really good laws to have music, I think the British revenue from music could actually be at least 3 times that. And then it will start to become a really, really significant sector, and they'll have to take notice. But we need to make that case very strongly to government at the moment, and we need them to go back in and have discussions on an EU level, because from my discussions with sort of my EU colleagues, they don't want this either. They don't want, but we will lose our advantage. We will lose. There are certain sectors of people in Europe who would be very happy to have less British bands on their radio, and very happy to have less British bands in their festivals. Understandably, I'd be miffed if we had nothing but Danish bands. Although
I found the government response to the petition, which was a very, which was, I don't know, 200 and how many thousands was it of people who were actually complaining about this, and yet their response was so unbelievably, it just felt like it was condescending, and again it was shifting blame onto the EU, and this idea that that the EU were, that we would have actually put forward as the UK a better proposal for musicians. I think that was nonsense, because from everything I understand, it was about the fact that we weren't going to reciprocate because we were so protective about this idea of ending freedom of movement. So it's just very frustrating, because that's what I mean about getting the government to care. And you're right, YolanDa, to talk about really trying to make sure they understand the narrative and the issues faced by musicians in reality.
So if we are looking to some sort of recovery in 2021, the opportunity to reimagine, to reframe the future of the music industry, how do we, to use that cliche phrase, how do we build back better? Nitin, I know you can tell us about a bit more about PRS's Power Up, which has just launched. Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited that that's just been launched. I mean, this is an initiative to address systematic racism in the music industry, but also underrepresentation, marginalization, and lack of visibility for Black music creators and also professionals in where you have companies that are Black run. There is in the industry there's phenomenal disparity, and I think, like I was saying, the Black Lives Matter movement last year actually really highlighted that. And we were addressing that with Sustaining Creativity Fund. We were addressing the hardship side of it. But moving forward, it's actually about addressing the intrinsic unfairness and imbalances. And really, I'm very proud of that fact. I mean, we've got your Owusu, who's now who's from the Playmaker Group, but is a consultant now for the Power Up initiative. So I think that's great, because he's fantastic, and I think it feels like there's a real sense that we might be able to make a difference and change something with that. And so yeah, I'm very proud of that.
So have you got all sorts of trade associations signed up to be part of this?
Yes, so I mean, like at the moment, I mean, including Spotify as well, and I think YouTube as well. I mean, like, there are streaming organizations who actually are, and I think that's good, because I think that's the way you do change things, is by making sure that organizations are involved as well in supporting something like this.
Yolanda, what's been your experience of the Black Lives Matter movement, and what, if anything, have you been able to see change or affect as change?
Yeah, I think, from starting from the hurt of it all within the Black community, and also from outside of the community, thinking, I don't know, have I been a part of it? Have I been party to it? Now we're in this period of reflection and trying to understand what happened in history. And it's great now that the conversation is still alive and it's happening today. I think what we need to do as organizations is to keep that conversation alive, especially within our industry, and sort of almost create a consistent reassessment of ourselves, really active steps to changing what's happened, and not feeling that it's being blunt or, oh, am I jumping on the bandwagon? It is something that needs to change, so do it. And don't feel that, you should shy away from the conversation, actually really be proactive about it. And especially in youth music, for us, it is about keeping that conversation alive. All of the organizations that we work with and music industry sort of corporates that we work with, always keeping that conversation at the forefront. And I think then we will continue to see change, because it will be an active part of our everyday lifestyle and our ecosystem.
And have you found yourself, whether you like it or not, being asked to represent certain communities?
Not really, and I get asked this a lot sort of in interviews. I am doing what I can as an artist and as a human being in our world to make change. I'm not doing it because I am Black, I'm doing it because I want to. And so with that in mind, if anybody asks me to do anything, I will probably be there, because I believe in what I'm doing, not doing it to want to do a checkbox. And that is the conversation. We need to get away from that feeling of, oh, we do need a Black person here. Who will we get? Well, you do need a Black person there, so get someone good. And I think we need to get away from the fact of, are we checking boxes? Yeah. There should be representation everywhere that we look. And I don't think that anybody from a minority group should feel that they're just being put there because they're ticking a box. Go in, make a difference, and make it normal. And that's kind of how I live my life. So being a Black woman and chair of youth music, I don't see it as a checkbox. I see it as I'm there to do a job, and that was the right job at the time.
And can I add to that by just quickly saying that, I mean, absolutely, because I mean, the Black artists, for example, that the PRS Foundation has supported in the past are people that I really listen to a lot and think are very inspiring artists, full stop. I mean, from Nabaya Garcia to Ezra Collective to Little Sims to, Dave, they're all people I listen to and think are fantastic and very exciting. Carleen Anderson, people I really look up to. So, for me, it's very clear that this is about addressing disparity, that needs to be addressed. I mean, inequity, because it enriches us all. It doesn't just help those people, who have had that unfairness towards them. It also enriches all of our lives.
Crispin, will you tell us about standing down from PPL and?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to do that. I think that it's very conspicuous of the music industry. Black Lives Matter resonates very, is a fantastic moment, and that, for want of a better idiom, that elephant is now, it's been exposed, and it cannot just go away. It has to be addressed. And Nitin talked about structural racism in the music industry. I think there has been structural racism in the music industry in the past. I mean, indeed, you could argue that there is no better example of an industry which has ruthlessly exploited Black culture and given very little back to Black culture than the pop music industry. All pop music is Black music, but it strikes me that in the kind of organizational structures, I don't think there is anything overtly racist, or not much overtly racist, but and forgive me, it's crass of me as a middle-aged white bloke called Crispin to be having this conversation, but I think I should be at the same time. But I think that one has to create a window for change. You have to create an opportunity for change, and that has to be structurally engineered into the into the organizations that need change. So PPL's board was predominantly white and male and aged, and the only way that you're going to create real change is if you stand down. So I stood down from PPL board in order specifically to get someone who wasn't pale and male in. It half worked. There were two people, one of whom was older and whiter than me, and the other who was Jackie Davidson, who's an extraordinary and brilliant representative, and an extraordinary and brilliant artist manager. So that's positive. It won't happen overnight, but I do think that in the Ivors Academy, in the same way, Paul Hartnell from Orbital stood down, and Stephen McNeff, who was the former chair, stood down in order to create a more diverse board. There needs to be positive discrimination going on. In order to counter the kind of negative discrimination which has been rife throughout the industry in the past. And we need to address this, and it needs to be addressed structurally as well. There needs to be fixed terms for all board members. You shouldn't be on a board for more than 9 years, because then you get entrenched and you begin to think it's your role rather than your privilege.
I just wanted to add to that as well. I know to some people that may be listening, they're thinking that's a really drastic thing, to step down, to come out of sort of your role and leave a space. It won't be forever. And that's something that I do want to say, this action is the start of a reaction and a change within our industry. And, I have to thank you, Crispin, for that. At this moment, we are actively making deliberate actions to make sure that this change happens, and then it will become the norm. So I do want to sort of encourage people out there that say, why should we, or what's happening here? It is a moment of change, and change always does feel quite hard to go through. Even right now, I'm in the process of recruiting for our board with new trustees, and in the invitation to apply, we do explicitly say that we are looking for people from Black and Indigenous and different race and cultural backgrounds. That won't be in our applications all the time, but we are in a moment of change, and we have to make sure that we go out and get exactly what we're looking for and what we want to see for the future.
We've just about got time for all of you to tell us what's coming up next for you. YolanDa is schooling the nation for free for a start. What else are you doing, YolanDa?
Yes, I know, with my other hats on. Just released the YolanDa's Band Jam album, which I'm really excited about. And now that we're at home, remote learning, the Join the Jam music education resources available on Twinkle as well, which I'm just so glad about. And I think that is what we want to see in the future, industry stepping up and taking a lead, because we can't always wait for government, as we've spoken about. We can't always wait for the change to happen elsewhere, and as an industry we are equipped to do so. So yeah, I want to see more of that, and I'm looking forward to sort of more touring when we can get back. And as Nitin knows, we've been creating music during these lockdowns. I'm really excited about projects that we've got coming out, and I've been collaborating with you in the studio as well, Nitin, which has been lovely. So more music to come and lots more exciting projects.
What about you, Nitin?
Lots of things. I mean, I've got my new album that's coming out called Immigrants, which is coming out on March 19th, which is a sequel to the album Beyond Skin that I released in 1999. I'm an ambassador for the Royal Albert Hall this year, and I'm curating a festival called Journeys, which is happening in October, November, which will include. It's really looking at 150 years of immigration into this country, and talking about that in a celebratory way, and really kind of putting on curating some interesting musicians and artists during the course of that week. And also I'll be chairing some panel discussions about immigration as well during the course of that. But in addition, I'm also scoring several films at the moment. I'm working with, I'm producing Jules Holland's new album, just been working with Naughty Boy on a new project. And yeah, obviously on Jules Holland's album includes a wonderful track with YolanDa. Yeah, it's been really good. I've just been working hard. I mean, if I didn't feel the world was totally falling apart, I'd almost fool myself into thinking these were good times, but they're certainly not. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I've just kept going really, and I think that's the thing, is just to try to ignore all the noise of anxiety that you feel every day when you wake up, seeing the statistics and the information that comes at you that makes you incredibly sad. But I mean, it's just about ignoring that and keep going really.
Crispin, you have the last word.
Yeah. Well, I've got, thankfully, I've got a bunch of sessions booked in, which I'm really looking with some fantastic artists I'm going to be writing with. But the thing that I'm most positive about is that I think there really is a kind of so many healthy conversations going on. I think COVID in a way has kind of allowed us to, and lockdown has allowed us to kind of step off the rat race and kind of reassess. And the whole idea about building back better, let's get back to normal. I think everybody has agreed that normal was pretty crap. And we do need to create something better. And there's a whole conversation about profit and proportionality and the balance between profit and proportionality, which now needs to take shape. I'm incredibly enthusiastic about Joe Biden being in America. It already seems like the world is more rational, and that neo-populist project has been decapitated, thank God. I'm incredibly positive about what will come out of the DCMS Select Committee into streaming. I think it's important that that politicians are beginning to have some kind of oversight or understanding of how the music industry works and how they can. And I think there's a conversation that will develop. I think people are quite entrenched in their positions at the moment, but there's a conversation that will develop, because at the moment the industry is fantastically polarized, and it's hard work and pretty harsh for certain sectors of the music industry to understand that they are part of the polarization. But I really believe that once that industry sits down and comes together, there's a future for the music industry that can be fantastically balanced and profitable and reasonable for all the participants. Guys, that was a real rant, wasn't it?
No, that was great. Encapsulated everything.
Harmony, though. That's good.
That's all we have time for. So thank you, YolanDa, Nitin, Crispin. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Nikki.
Nitin. Cheers, YolanDa. Cheers, Nikki.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Nancy Mills and I'm part of the member services team at PPL, the UK's music licensing company for performers and recording rights holders. UK law says that if you have played on or own the rights to a music recording, you are owed a share of the royalties from when it is played in public. PPL is the company that collects and distributes these royalties. We do this on behalf of the performers on a recording, such as a guitarist or a singer, and the recording rights holder, typically a record label or a self-releasing artist. We represent over 120,000 performers and recording rights holders, and in 2019, collected a total of £271.8 million for our members. We collect this money by licensing recorded music in the UK when it is used in a radio or TV broadcast, on an online radio service, or in public such as in shops, bars and offices. This is via PPL PRS Limited, our licensing joint venture with PRS for Music. PPL then distributes the fees paid by these companies to the performers and recording rights holders that we represent. Having invested their time, talent and money to making recorded music, they are entitled to a fair payment when it is broadcast or played in public. We also collect and distribute royalties for when recorded music is played in public overseas. This ensures our members receive royalties when their music is played outside of the UK. So what does this mean for you or the people that you work with? If you have contributed to or own the rights to a sound recording, you could be entitled to receive payments from PPL. To enable this, you simply need to register your details to become a performer or recording rights holder member of PPL, and then, using our online member portal, My PPL, register the details of your recordings with us and or link yourself to the recordings on which you have performed. Membership is free and you can sign up on our website, which is ppluk.com. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Davey Wells, who will tell you a little bit more about our work with PRS Foundation.
Thanks, Nancy. Hi, I'm Davey Wells and I'm a Performer Development Executive at PPL. PPL is proud to be a key partner of PRS Foundation. We collaborate with PRS Foundation via the PPL Momentum Fund, which you're likely all familiar with. We support it both financially and with our time and expertise. PPL Momentum Fund offers career boosting grants of between £5,000 and £15,000 to UK-based artists and bands who are at a pivotal point in their development. We also contribute to the International Showcase Fund, or ISF for short, which in 2020 has pivoted to support virtual showcases for performers who are export ready. ISF is designed to support artists making their first steps to showcase in other territories, and ISF now supports live-streamed or pre-recorded performances and digital conference attendance to engage with an international industry audience. Finally, as Joe mentioned earlier, we are thrilled to be now supporting the incredible Talent Development Partner Network. We look forward to meeting you all, either virtually or in real life soon. If you have any questions, we have a member services team that is on hand to help with any queries. Contact details can be found on our website, which is ppluk.com. We also host education events throughout the year virtually and, when restrictions will allow, back at our London, Soho offices and across the country. Thanks for listening and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.